Okay, so the drug war. I can't believe we're even talking about this still. It's absolutely one of the greatest modern travesties. It has its roots in racism. Um, I believe that it is also a very widely held misconception that it is the product of naivety and hysteria and genuinely misled authorities. This is just not true. If you go all the way back to the Harry Anslinger commissioned studies on cannabis in the late 30s and early 40s, what the researchers actually said was this plant is safe, it's not likely addictive, you shouldn't ban it. And they said, okay, well, we need to arrest black people and Mexicans, so let's go ahead and make it illegal. And of course, there was more to it than that. There was William Hearst, who owned the paper mills and the newspaper companies, and he was very much threatened by hemp. And I think another thing to take into consideration, and this is something that we're struggling to correct in other industries as well, particularly the energy industry, oil. When we are interested in switching over to, say, photoelectric or wind-powered energy, the same people that are making money off oil now could still profit, but the amount of money they would have to spend on the overhaul of infrastructure is so high that they would rather go to war because they can make money off of that too. And this is, this relates back to the drug war in that way as well. There's a tremendous amount of profit for a surprising number of people, including, a lot of people feel that like legitimate companies, major corporations would not knowingly launder drug money, but yet we have absolute proof to the contrary. And so what I was getting at is that William Randolph Hearst, it's not like he couldn't have just spent some money and changed his business over to hemp farming. Hemp is a relatively quick crop to produce. It has a lot of different uses, so it would have allowed him to. Ultimately, it probably would have been more profitable, but I think there were a number of reasons why he wasn't thinking along those lines. And speaking of hemp, it's just a complete insane travesty that hemp was banned along with marijuana. I mean, even if marijuana was this horrible thing that made you stupid and dysfunctional, and tell that to Joe Rogan's $100 million contract with Spotify, right? I mean, are you guys serious? It's much more than just that. Hemp is so useful in so many different ways and so renewable. The fact that it was banned that of, I mean, do you guys remember politicians telling people that it might have been Biden actually, I wouldn't be surprised, that hemp clothes should be banned because people were going to boil them to get the THC out. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that these guys who have actually gotten, they receive studies that say, there's no hemp or there's no THC in hemp. No, my point is, you guys, the researchers never told them it was dangerous. This has never been about naive, misguided politicians. They have been fucking lying to everyone, right? Putting people in prison, mass incarceration, and in my opinion, the suppression of consciousness. Look, psychedelics are the same thing. When the researchers in the 60s looked at LSD and psilocybin, they said almost the exact same stuff that the researchers at Princeton and Harvard and all of these places all over the world are saying now. These substances are unbelievably safe. They're non-addictive. We have no cures for addiction, PTSD, depression, alcoholism, whatever, you name it. I mean, even schizophrenia. It's possible that psychopathy, they're thinking, could be corrected with psychedelics. And we, particularly prefrontal dementia, these are very dangerous mental health conditions that we have no cure short of like heavy tranquilizers and frontal lobotomies currently, right? And these treatments with psychedelics have been shown to be effective in one session. So literally what happened, you guys, there's a great book called The Varieties of Psychedelic Experience by Gene Masters and Masters in Houston, PhD, medical doctors that were researching this stuff before it was illegal in like 1963 to 1965. They only had a couple of years. And as soon as they sent their report to the federal government saying, we don't need all these pharmaceuticals anymore, we have these amazing compounds that can correct all of this stuff with a single treatment, they went, oh no, Big Pharma said, send cops. And if you can't find a way to arrest these researchers, at least shut them down and ban these substances. That's what really happened. This is not naivety. This is not misguided politicians. This is corruption. This is the suppression of evolution. This is intentionally mitigated progress for our collective mental health to a degree that is absolutely a crime against humanity. Okay, so I'm almost hesitant to like start going over numbers, because for one thing, I was really shocked when I was like doing research for this live stream. I could not find a lot of really like current information. It seemed like most of it was like from 2012, 2014. And I almost got the feeling it's not that people don't care, it's just that they've given up. You know, I mean, here we are in 2020. People know that pot is not what people made it out to be. All of the LSD horror stories have been traced back to the federal government in the United States, right? We have researchers in a ton of different fields, from consciousness to psychology and neuroscience, all just, I mean, one of the reasons that I think people are hesitant to believe these researchers is because they sound so almost fanatical, because the promise of these compounds is so extraordinarily great that it doesn't sound realistic, right? Well, and that's what I was saying, Earthworth. Hemp cannabis putting people out of business, not if they were willing to just invest a little bit in changes in infrastructure and look, survival of the fittest is not really correct. It is survival of the most adaptable. So ultimately, not only is it in the collective interest that a lot of these people redirect their focus and their business MO, it's in their best interest too, because something like hemp, for example, is sustainable. You know, this other stuff, we're almost out of time on all of it. Okay, but let's talk about the numbers a little bit, just because this is mind-blowing that this is still happening. And then we're going to talk about harm reduction that would be derived from legalization. Hemp is the most beneficial plant, and we'll get to that. I mean, fuels, food, clothes, paper. It is renewable. It is very fast growing, and I'm sure, you know, I'm missing like what, plastics, and between that and the new mycelium technologies that are coming out, which, you know, you guys should all check that out too. I talked about it a little bit in my last live stream. We really do have the ability to reformat our or to completely re-engineer our relationship to the planet, how we produced waste. Producing nothing but biodegradable waste is becoming increasingly possible. We have building materials that, you know, if it was hempcrete and mycelium, we're talking about a superior structure with superior insulation to wood. It's renewable. It's fire resistant. I mean, it's just, the old world is dying, and that's why we see what we're seeing right now. These are the death throes of a bunch of psychopaths, basically, you know. And we all better kind of duck for a minute, I think. But when the smoke clears, we've got this. It's our world now. It's the dinosaurs are done. You know, they don't realize that as they're burning the other dinosaurs, they're burning themselves up into obsolescence as well. Okay, so $36.8 billion, over $1,000 a second is spent on the drug war. And what has it accomplished? it has given the authorities a way to put free thinkers, black people, and brown people into prison in astonishing numbers. Half of the people in federal prisons are in prison for drugs, and many of those are just simple possession. I mean, you guys know about the violence, but I'll talk about one particularly, the Iguala mass kidnapping of 43 students in Mexico, all murdered, every one of them. And what happens is the government's broke. The government is the cartel as well. The Iguala cartel, or the Iguala kidnappings were actually cops, Mexican cops, and the cartel working together to murder a bunch of students. So the corruption is insane, and legalization would put an end to the violence. It would put an end to the corruption. It would also make drugs much more safe. But let's not get into that yet. God, it's crazy. So what happens is the cartels will build a school, say in Mexico, and then they will tell the teachers, we want half of your pay that's coming from the government, right? And then when the teachers said, no, 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 they come to school and there are 14 heads in a trash bag on the porch. If you see video of a lot of these places where, border towns and places where the cartel really has a grip, there are people hanging from bridges everywhere. There are heads rolling in the streets. There are people getting blown to pieces all over the place. I mean, the violence is unthinkable. And it's not just that level of corruption down there. It has, once again, this is the first time since Capone, politicians in Chicago have taken to being like photographed, waving and smiling with gang leaders and cartel members. And it's, it's common knowledge that they are like drug lobbyists, right? So the expense is insane. And remember that when we're talking about $1,000 per second that would be saved, that doesn't include the tax revenue that would be generated by the legalization of all these substances. So let's look at a couple of case studies. And no, before we go on, let's talk about the Philippines, because it's not just the US, it's not just Mexico. Most first world countries have legalized drugs to a large extent, and the results have been phenomenal. For example, Portugal has more or less eradicated what was a completely crippling 1 out of 100 people was addicted to heroin. And once they legalized the drugs, this declined. We've seen this in Holland in the past. Norway is doing it. But on the other hand, we have places like the Philippines where the president has said, I am going to kill every single drug dealer and every single drug user in this entire country, and 20,000 people have been shot on site. This is not, there's no trial, there's no nothing. They just get shot in the head. And there are still a few other countries like Bali where people are getting beheaded. And so what I'm getting at with this is that if the US were to take a position that this is not the way to handle the drug war, it would send a signal to these dictators, potentially, and kings in places like Bali where people are still getting their heads cut off when they get caught smoking a joint, that that's not how to deal with it. Okay, so on top of all of that, if we had regulated substances, people are dying from cocaine that has been cut with fentanyl. People are dying from heroin that has been cut with fentanyl. Heroin is actually, and I'm not advocating heroin use, but just speaking from a physiological point of view in terms of toxicity, alcohol is much more damaging to your organs. People that consume it tend to be much more dangerous to other people, except for junkies that are desperate for money. And that ties back into the legalization thing, that if heroin wasn't tainted, that if it came with a label and it said, this is the purity, if this is your body weight, you can safely consume this much, it's all written on the box. Maybe it says also, needle use will increase your likelihood of addiction by 30%. All of this information, how to use it safely, it's not advocating, but if somebody's going to do it, the social harm is going to be drastically reduced just by having a sane approach, making sure that the drugs are clean, making sure that we know what's in them. advising people of proper dosages based on their body weight. And the tax revenue, right? So we're talking about, I mean, you guys know that worldwide, but particularly in the US and Russia right now, I think heroin is just absolutely wiping people out all over the place. It's extraordinarily damaging, and most of it is because of tainted drugs. It's because of a lack of regulation, and not to mention that we could stop empowering cartels that are, the most recent data I could find was from a few years back, and they were talking about hundreds of thousands of people killed in Mexico alone over the drug war. Well, thank you guys. Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but that's good to see. I went to prison for and listen to this, you guys, 2.5, because I was only taking a little bit at the time because I was actually trying to manage pain, and I had a prescription, but I didn't have proof on me, and I got a public defender, which in the United States is actually someone that works for the state whose job is to make sure that you go to jail. It's not really an attorney that's assigned to you for free. It's a guy whose job it is to work with the prosecutor to make sure that you get convicted and take a plea bargain, right? The guy never even asked me, did you have a prescription? We could just get the paperwork from your doctor, go into the court, we'll throw the case out, you can walk. That's what should have happened. I'm a felon. Over 2.5 7.5 milligram pills of hydrocodone that were found in my pocket by a police officer one night when I was leaving a bar when I was 26 years old. I went to almost maximum security prison. It was what do they call it, medium maximum or something. It was like the highest, second highest security without going to like full 23-hour lockdown. Most of the people around me were in prison forever. They were never getting out. I mean, I literally knew people with 800 years, people that hung body parts in trees and stuff. They kill you, they're going to the hole for 6 months. So anyone around you can kill you at any time. I spent 10 months of my life for that as a 27-year-old kid. Over 2.5 Vicodin, Loratab actually, that barely would have gotten me high. I mean, it wasn't even enough to harm anyone. A year, I did 10 months on a year with a bunch of murderers and child molesters. There was a guy in there that had been in since 1962. And so this is what happens. This is what happens in the United States over the way that the justice system is constructed. And I don't want to get too off base into police corruption and the way that they have engineered the system to be totally, it's not justice. I was just watching, I don't know why, because I don't watch this stuff, but there was a reality show with cops, and right on camera, as if there weren't cameras on, this girl, I think she was a teenager or something, and they did have some meth, and it looked like they were just users, though. They had some meth in a little green purse and some pipes and stuff that were stuffed into the part of the car. And the cop says, well, she knew where it was, which she never said. He also said she was able to describe the contents of the bag, never happened. So the point is that police in the United States are not trained to go after criminals. Their training is that if they can find a way to tag a charge on you once you have started interacting with them, even if they have to lie or whatever, that is how American policing works. And a lot of that started with the drug war, because it is, I smell marijuana, or do you have anything in the car, that gives them an inroad to, I mean, I smell marijuana is subjective. That doesn't prove anything. That's not evidence. That's just a cop saying shit. Oh, the corporate prison industry and Joe Biden. I mean, sorry to all you Democrats out there, but Kamala Harris is one of the evilest influences in the history of the drug war, and so is Joe Biden. I mean, I'm not a Trumper, not at all. Hate that guy, total scumbag. But the other side, total scumbags too. 300 people are doing life sentences because of Kamala Harris. She also suppressed evidence that would have exonerated someone on death row. And we're not even going to talk about Biden, but you're telling me that somebody that would actually send an innocent man to his death in order to save face, it wouldn't have even destroyed her career. That's how scary this is. She would have blushed a little bit, like, ooh, I made a mistake and convicted someone. She should have been thrilled to get that guy out of prison. Like, oh no, I made a terrible mistake. Someone's gonna die that doesn't deserve it. He's got a family. I should help him. No, doesn't matter. And it's not just Kamala Harrison. It's pretty much all Harris, whatever her name is, all prosecutors. They were looking to convict you. It doesn't matter whether you actually did it or not. That has nothing to do with it in the American justice system. All it's about, can we get a conviction? That's it. Yeah, and you guys know the 1994 crime bill, and also we're going to talk about crack cocaine in a minute, because it's really important, I think, for us to drop the naivety and not just believing that these politicians actually were misguided and thought that marijuana was actually destroying the youth and that psychedelics made you insane and all of this stuff that has turned out to be totally, abjectly fucking false. Like, no truth to it at all, right? Yeah, I mean, the cartels and the government are one and the same. But we've already touched on that. So where was I going with this? Okay, let's talk about the CIA and crack and the 1994 crime bill, because this is real, you guys. I'm not talking conspiracy theory shit. I won't do that. I say all the time that I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's not that I don't believe that there are conspiracies. That's completely stupid. If you just study psychology and you study propaganda, you even listen to Noam Chomsky, if you know how it works, it's so obvious that it's frightening that everyone doesn't see it. For example, in the United States, people outside of the United States know about the United States propaganda and the effect that it has, but it's like they're so indoctrinated and brainwashed that they have no clue how it works or what any of this stuff is for. So let's talk about the CIA and crack. And I am only referencing stuff that the government has admitted to. Okay, this is not theoretical. This is Freedom of Information Act releases that you can check yourself. And this thing, by the way, about people, witnesses and stuff getting suicided by shooting themselves in the head twice, this is when you hire someone to kill somebody, they generally will put two in the head. That's like an industry standard. It's crazy, I know, but it's true. Hitmen actually have industry standards. And one of them is when you are whacking someone two in the head. And so in Los Angeles in the 1980s, there was a huge problem in unemployment. It wasn't just Los Angeles, but this was the focal point for it, because I think there was also the most violence, and it's also an experimental playground for the CIA. And so there was a tremendous upsurge in unemployment in the African American community. And so the CIA had somehow heard about crack cocaine, and they flooded the ghettos with it and had their own agents distribute it. And they colluded with Joe Biden to write the crime bill later, and there were earlier stuff that other politicians passed to help them with this. But basically, that crime bill, part of it was designed to solve the African American problem, unemployment problem, or the African American problem, period, depending on what politician you're talking to, I suppose. It was a way to solve the African American unemployment problem by putting them all in prison for a very long time. And so they made the penalty for crack cocaine like 10 times as much time for that same amount of powdered cocaine. And people took that as being very racist, and perhaps it was. The one defense about that is that crystal methamphetamine, which is primarily used by white people, has the same penalties in most places as crack cocaine. So there is a sort of counterbalance there. Either way, totally sucks. But a cop found this unconscionable. I can't remember his name, but he blew the whistle on this, and he offered proof. And he was very rapidly found suicided with 2 bullets in his head. So if you look at the CIA's confession, I guess, where they acknowledged that they had indeed sold a bunch of crack to black people so that they could arrest them and put them in prison forever. They had part of the Freedom of Information Act deal is that if there are sensitive issues to such an extent that it's a threat to national security, they're allowed to black them out. Okay? Most of this page that admits selling crack and locking up the recipients of it or whatever is blacked out. So the question then becomes, what was so much worse than selling crack to black people so that you could put them in prison that it got blacked out? And it's seriously, it's like half the page at least. So you guys, I'm not trying to be a fear monger, but when we talk about waking up, I think one of the most bitter pills we have to swallow is that the monster we're trying to take by the horns is much more out of control. It is much more malignant than the vast majority of people are even willing to consider. And if you so much as suggest it, most of the mainstream will delete you. They just don't want to think about it. They don't want to confront it. They don't want to deal with it. But if we're going to affect the kind of change that we need in order to make the world a reasonably habitable place with a reasonable amount of personal freedom, we have to confront these things head on. And this is the time. And myself, you know, when I was a teenager, I came from a very, very poor, broken family. And I got to see a lot of this stuff myself, and it happened to happen in Washington, D.C. when I was involved in, let's just say that there was a period in my life that was kind of like a Quentin Tarantino movie written by Biggie Smalls, right? Like, I mean, I've had Tech Nines in my mouth with the trigger pulled and there's no clip in, and you know, scares the hell out of you, trust me. But I saw it firsthand in Washington, D.C. You know, the power of the cocaine trade. I knew a drill sergeant at Quantico that kept all of his cocaine in his safe on the base because he knew it was safe there. Let's see. Bill Crack Cocaine Clinton. Yeah, he had a lot to do with it as well, but yeah, I mean, the private prison industry is an absolutely horrendous travesty of justice. Okay, so, and I mean, you guys know what to do. I'll put some links in the comments when we're done in just a few minutes, I think. Normal, you know, you can throw money at organizations like that. Maps for psychedelic research, write your goddamn congressman, stop voting Democrat and Republican. It's the same fucking thing. And I don't care if you don't like hearing it. If you're going to vote at all, vote libertarian, and stop blaming the 2% of people that vote third party when the red and blue people can't convince 30%, the ones that don't vote at all. Okay. So we really just need to take some personal responsibility and put a lot more change or effort and energy into creating awareness and making the changes with how we vote, how we spend our dollars. Investments, you know, I've been trying to really encourage people to invest in the mycelium companies, the mind med and the psychedelic medicine companies, hemp companies. Empower the people that are doing the right work to make the changes that we need to see. So do me a favor, hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon if you can. We are going to Puyo in like 10 days to spend some time with the Shuar, the indigenous tribe there, and talk a little bit with them. I think we're going to be heading out to Brazil as well, to talk to the Kaxinawa and some of the other tribes there, Yanomama, Yamanawa. So lots of interesting developments. Thanks so much for spending this time with me. And in the fucking drug war, I mean, how is this still a thing? How is it still a thing? And but by the way, I want to mention this before I go. I mean, I know how much it pisses people off when you take shots at Joe Biden because people hate Trump so much. And I'm with you. I totally am. I wish I didn't have to. But when I see this guy say things like, you know, well, we need more studies to be done. Legalizing marijuana is the stupidest thing that anyone's ever done. And I mean, just a few months ago, he said, drug users shouldn't be in jail. They should go straight to prison. I mean, I'm sorry, you guys. It's like 1982 or something with Reagan, and this is supposed to be like the progressive side. I mean, if you look at somebody like Ben Shapiro, who is a conservative, he's religious. I mean, even I saw him talking to Joe Rogan the other day. I couldn't believe it. I'm like, really, Rogan? Are you going to try to convince Shapiro to smoke DMT? Is that what's about to happen? And almost, I mean, almost, he was trying to tell him, have you considered that maybe uh, these altered states of consciousness aren't bad? And Shapiro said, yes, I think that's entirely probable. And if there, I haven't looked at the evidence, but if there is evidence, I will look at it. And um, that's a little bit of positivity, you guys, because like I said, I don't agree with everything that comes out of Shapiro's mouth. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we would never have seen a conservative talking like that guy about the kind of stuff that he says. They used to say transgendered people should go to hell. For him to say, I don't think the government should mandate my free speech and create laws that say that I have to use a certain gender pronoun is very different from saying transgendered people should just burn in hell, which is what we used to get, or all drug users should be shot, like Nancy Reagan. So I'm saying two things there. It's sad on the one hand that we have someone that's supposed to be a Democrat saying this stupid, ignorant shit that we know he knows better than. Okay, all of the studies about marijuana have always said the same thing. We've never had any that weren't fabricated by like the DEA. Like, what is he even referencing? You know? And that's the thing, you guys. We have to stop pretending to believe that they are just misguided. They're lying on purpose. They know they're lying. They're lying through their fucking teeth, and they're doing it for a reason, and they're doing it to keep people in prison, to maintain the private prison industry. I mean, just stop it. It's just... Well, yeah, 222 Blue. Terrence McKenna said, psychedelics don't work on stupid people, which is only sort of true, but it is definitely the ears of wisdom, or the lips of wisdom are closed, but to the ears of understanding, right? I mean, that's maybe a little bit nicer of a way to say it. I didn't have a conversation with Rogan. I'm sorry, did I say that? What I was talking about is Shapiro talking to Rogan. And just how it was like comforting to see a conservative that was, he's not like an acid dropping hippie conservative, but I don't think I've ever seen someone coming from the right that was that open-minded when he's like hearing about DMT entities and talking about transgender people. And it really did seem like he was more concerned with protecting free speech than condemning transgendered people. I mean, I think if Shapiro ran as a Democrat right now, it would be way better than Biden, even though he's technically a conservative Republican. And I know he says a lot of things that people don't like, but I've spent a lot of time over the last couple of weeks just watching this guy and thinking like, I mean, he seems more honest and reasonable than even any of the Democrats when they're asked the same question. And that is horrifying, you guys, to me anyways. It's also horrifying to see things like Barack Obama. He went back on every promise that he ever made, and it's like all the Democrats still believe that he was the public image that they were sold. He said they wouldn't raid legal pot businesses under his administration. They went up 400% compared. I live in California. I watched it, right? I know people that got fucked over because they believed the word of the president of the United States. Really? They crossed their T's, dotted their I's. Family dog shot in front of the kids because they have a legal pot business. They're paying taxes because they were tricked, because they believed in Barack Obama. 400% increase in legal or raids on legal pot businesses compared to Bush. That is fucked up. And if you ask me, any person that is if you're a president and you give your word about something on the campaign trail, and then people actually end up with their children traumatized, their livelihood destroyed because they trusted you, that motherfucker should be in prison for a long time. Okay? Promised to close Guantanamo Bay, did not. Promised to repeal the Patriot Act, and then he got Joe Biden to run alongside of him, who claims to have authored it. On top of saying that he would uphold the U.S. Constitution, he actually had signed death warrants on 3 U.S. citizens with um, no trial. That's not upholding the fucking Constitution. That's wiping your ass with it and handing the shit-stained rag to the American people. Fuck that guy. And most of the Democrats are still like, oh, he was so great. No, man, he was just as bad as any of the rest of them, and it will stay the same until we all start making different choices and take the power back, until we actually have the courage to confront what's actually happening, how bad it's gotten, and fucking do something about it. So thank you so much for spending this time with me, and we will see you again next Tuesday, same bat time.